Okay, so we're now being recorded. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So to the folks on the call here today and the folks who are of course, watching this video recording, thank you guys so much. Again, my name is Lena Militello, and I am your Cadence Client Success Lead. All that means is just a fancy term that I'm your point person for anything and everything texting related in the Cadence platform itself. I am here, of course, to be your support system as you go through the steps to train, or what we refer to as onboard yourself, and get ready to start using, of course, the Cadence texting tool once your site decides to fully launch. I do not go away after that period, so don't think you only have me for a limited period of time. I'm going to be continuously checking in with you. I'm a former higher ed professional myself, and I worked in Cadence and to communicate with students on a nearly daily basis. So I understand what it's like to use it from that user perspective, and will, of course, be able to hear your feedback, address your questions, really whatever I can do to be of service for you, I am here. So the purpose of this call here today is to provide a 101 sort of basis, all things to know, as you're now, of course, getting ready to familiarize yourself with the Cadence platform, to start using it for regular texting of your students. Every single user should have gotten a few emails from Mongoose and some from myself. The very first email that you should have gotten would allow you to complete setting up your account through verifying your email address and a password of your choosing for login purposes. So for anyone, again, on the call here today or watching who may not have taken the steps to do that, please make sure that you do that as soon as possible so that you can, of course, have access to the system. So one thing you'll want to, of course, do is share sms.mongooseresearch.com in your browser as, like a favorite, or bookmark it so that it's easily accessible for you, and that you can, of course, have that information, because when you get in the morning and you log into your email and all the other systems that you might have to log into to start your day, you'll want to, of course, have easy access to Cadence for login purposes. So the very first step to log into your account, once you, again, of course, have finished setting up your account through that activation, is through that email address and that password of your choosing. You should, of course, not be sharing your password. Every single person who has access to Cadence for Gear Up has their own unique login credentials. So make sure you're keeping that to yourself and keeping that handy. If for whatever reason you do happen to forget your password and need it reset for whatever reason, make sure you reach out to either Shara or Sarah or myself so that I can take the steps to do that for you. So once again, you'll be logging into the system with your email address and then, of course, a password of your choosing. When you first click in to sign in, it's going to automatically default you to what we refer to as a dashboard. And the dashboard view here is going to give you an overview of all of the message activity associated with your Cadence line, so that you can track over a daily, weekly, and monthly time frame how active you've been in your texting account. So how many text messages you've sent out, what that average reply rate looks like. If that is a number that you like to see, keep it up. If it's something that maybe you want to get a little bit higher, of course, feel free to reach out to me for some feedback so that we can discuss that further. You may also have noticed in your dashboard view, you're able to see the activity associated with any shared inboxes for your team. So we're going to spend a little bit of time later in the call today talking about texting out of your personal line versus an office line. So a personal inbox versus one of these shared inboxes. But note that you're able to track that message activity Again, the same sort of message activity timeframes you can adjust if again you do have access to such an account and that's something your office would like you to monitor or see. Another really important feature of the dashboard that you'll probably want to pay attention to is the average reply times. So this tells me, as someone who is sending text messages out, how quickly the students that I'm texting are engaging back with me via text message. So as you can see here, I have a very responsive audience, and they're getting back to me in a really quick amount of time, less than 5 minutes. So this, of course, is going to help me really make myself most available in the system. If I know that when I'm texting with students, I'm most likely to get a near instantaneous response, I'm going to want to make sure that I make myself readily available around the times that I'm texting them. I'm not going to send out a text message and then leave the office for the day or take a 3-hour lunch break, because I know that I'm going to have, the majority of my students wanting to engage with me, having to wait, a longer amount of time than's really necessary. So definitely be aware of your dashboard and be aware of the, basic message activity, and monitor that. Again, if you notice anything that maybe isn't to your liking or something that just simply isn't making sense, be sure to, of course, to reach out to Sarah, to Shara, who are, of course, your designated project leads for Cadence, as well as reaching out to me as well too for feedback or suggestions. I now want to draw your attention to the very upper right-hand corner, because we're going to spend a little bit of time here. Clicking on that question mark icon here is going to open up Otto. Otto is powered by Drift, and he is a member of the Mongoose family in our sister product Harmony. So we work with virtual assistant and chatbot solutions for websites for colleges and universities. And we have programmed our own virtual assistant, Otto. He is the Mongoose branded chatbot right into Cadence for you as an end user. So what does this essentially mean? This means that when you're logged into Cadence and you want to get in touch with me via chat, you can click on this button here as well too. Now, if I'm not available, perhaps if I'm on a call, just like this very call that I'm on right now, Otto can get you over to schedule an appointment with me by pulling up my calendar availability so that we can schedule a later time for us to connect so that you can address questions or concerns. Otto can also send you some resources. Say if you want to submit some feedback about Cadence, he can gather that information for you. Or if there's a particular feature that you're looking to learn a little bit more about, or maybe best practices, for example, he can get you over to our Mongoose knowledge base, which you have access to. Don't think that you have to go through Otto for these things. You have a direct line to me with all of my contact information. So if you want to connect with me via phone, via email, setting up one of those conference calls or appointments, you can just reach out to me directly so that we can coordinate that. This is just a nice feature for you to have when you're logged into Cadence in case that's something that you want available to you. Now I'm going to direct your attention to the circle with my first initial. This is going to allow me to drop down into a different team if I have access to multiple teams within the greater Gear Up system. So if I'm messaging on behalf of a couple different offices or sites, this is where I would go to navigate in between those views. But it's also most importantly where I go to get into my profile view. So clicking on the profile shows me all of the information that's associated with my Cadence account. So I'm able to, of course, see and update my name. I'm able to see the email address that's on file for when I log in. That's obviously how I get into the system. So we want to make sure that that information is up to date. But then most importantly here, it's going to give you information associated with your Cadence number or your Cadence line. This 10-digit long code number, which is of course, in my local area code, because I'm talking to you from Buffalo, New York today, so we're 716. You should see something in either 435 or 801, I believe, for your designated area. But this is the number that will come through on my student's phone every single time I send a text message from my personal inbox. So this is my personal dedicated Cadence line. This is where students can reach me for texting capabilities. So this would be the number that you would want to advertise to your students, like, hey, questions, make sure to text me here at this number because this is where you can reach me. Now, just to clarify, Cadence does not have call capabilities. So you cannot talk to your students through your Cadence number. If you need to speak with students on the phone, you're of course going to want to give them, either your work cell phone number, if that's something that you have, or your dedicated office line, wherever you're able, of course, to connect with them that way. But it does have the ability to auto forward any accidental voice calls to your Cadence number. So I do highly recommend that every single Cadence user program a voice call forwarding number here. In the event that a student accidentally calls this line, we can forward those voice calls over to a place, again, where you can actually receive telephone calls. This has to be a direct number. It cannot be something with an extension or something that is rerouted. So your direct office line or your direct work mobile, whatever your preference might be. Are there any questions or concerns about the information in the profile? Okay, moving right along to notifications. This tab is extremely important because it's unique to every single user in the system. This allows you to manage how you want Mongoose to notify you when you have text messages. So in the event you're not logged into Cadence, maybe you forgot to pull it up for the day, you got sidetracked. These types of notifications will allow you to be notified when there is activity in your accounts. These will start from a place of being turned on. And this means that Mongoose will send you an email notification to the email we have on file for you, and a push notification if you have the Mongoose Cadence app downloaded onto your smartphone device. Every single time there is a brand new text message to your personal Cadence number. So again, this number right here, that's my messages. And then any shared inbox accounts that you might have access to. So again, these are the office-based accounts that are set up for multiple members of your team. So if you do not want to be notified via email when there are messages, and they will send you an email every single time there is a new text message, you need to make sure that you uncheck these boxes and click Save to Update. Any questions or concerns there? Okay. We're then going to skip over security and go right to the out of office feature. So this is something that is available to you for your personal Cadence inbox and that dedicated line. So again, this number that's located here. So similarly to how you probably have an out of office set up for your emails, you can program Cadence to offer the same type of feature when you know that you're going to be away for a short period of time. Like the 4th of July weekend actually might be a perfect example if you have, special holiday hours. So if that is the case, what you will want to do, of course, is to adjust the message here. July 5th for the weekend. So I will turn this on and click save. And this will allow for anyone who messages into me during the period that this is turned on to receive the message that I've programmed here as an automated text message. Now, not unlike email out of office that you can program to start and stop at a specific date and time, Cadence you do need to physically turn on as well as physically turn off. How it will work again, of course, when this is turned on and enabled, any student who messages into your Cadence line will receive this as an automatic text message to them. They'll only receive one per day. So if they continue to reach out to you, they won't continue to receive these auto replies. However, their entire conversation will live as unread messages in your personal inbox so that when you return to the office and you log back in, you can see what questions or concerns they may have reached out to you to ask about, and then you can follow up accordingly. Don't forget that when you do return, you have to physically turn it off by clicking that button. Any questions or concerns about out of office? And feel free, of course, to unmute yourself if you are muted for those questions. Okay. So now we're going to spend a little bit of time going over this left-hand tool navigation bar because this is where you're going to be spending the majority of your time when you're logged into the system. So it's really important to get very comfortable navigating in between these different bars. We're of course going to skip over the big giant red compose button until the very end. When I actually show you what a live text message looks like, composing that to go out. We already spent some time going over the dashboard, so now we're going to dive right into your personal inbox. So your personal inbox here is always going to be labeled as messages. Again, this is where you're going to receive Cadence communication and text messages at that dedicated Cadence line that's assigned to you. You're going to see that this looks very similarly to perhaps your email inbox, and you should probably treat it as such, making sure you have a clear inbox as much as possible so that you can, of course, navigate your text conversations most effectively. New messages will come in and appear as such. I'm going to actually move some of these out of the archive so I can show you what that looks like. So if I move them on over to the inbox, you can see that's where they live. And I'm going to mark all of them as unread so you can see when they're brand new that it's what it will look like for you. You're able to manage each conversation individually with each of your student contacts. So clicking into the conversation that I have here with Kelsey, I'm able to see our entire conversation history actually going back to the beginning of this year. So when I, of course, am texting Kelsey, I can always reference our previous conversations, when we last communicated, and any information that we might have shared. When I'm satisfied that I perhaps have, concluded a conversation with Kelsey, I can move her on over to the archive. Moving her over to the archive just simply moves her out of my inbox so that I can focus on the other conversations that I need to with my students in here. If Kelsey again continues the conversation, it will filter back into my inbox as a brand new message that I can read. And again, I'm not losing any of that conversation history because it's, again, stored all the way back to the first time that Kelsey and I ever communicated on my dedicated Cadence line. I can perform some bulk actions in my inbox here. So if I want to, mark all of these messages as read, for example, I can do that. I can also reply en masse to these folks. So if I needed to do that, you can see how that works there. And I can also archive in bulk as well too, just as I can move conversations from the archive back into the inbox and bulk too. Another feature that I can perform a bulk action to is opting out. So say, for example, here, Caleb and Mike told me that they were no longer interested in getting my text messages. They're not interested in moving forward. Please remove them from the list. What I would need to do, of course, is opt them out of receiving my text communication. I'm not going to delete them out of the system. I'm simply going to designate that they no longer want text communication and then move their conversations over to the archive. Then, if they wish to start engaging with me again in text messaging, all they need to do is text my number and they can be opted back in. A student can also identify that they don't want to receive text messages by auto opting out with their carrier. And that's if they text in stop, quit, end, unsubscribe, any of those kind of keywords or buzzwords will automatically unenroll them from receiving text communications from you. If that's the case, no other steps need to be taken. All you would need to do, of course, is move them over to the archive. And then, again, it preserves their preferences. You don't have to delete them out or anything like that. It just moves them away from your inbox. And should they ever wish to start communicating with you again, they can start texting back into your line. You also can filter the inbox with unread messages to read messages, as well as sort them from oldest to newest. So really do perform some of these bulk actions as you're managing your inbox, because that's going to help tremendously. The sent message details portion of the inbox shows you all of your outbound communication. This, of course, is to individual students that you're reaching out to, as well as people that you're reaching out to in bulk. So segments, for example. When you're sending a message to more than one person, a really cool feature in Cadence is that you can filter the recipients based upon certain characteristics. So if you wanted to see of the people who you reached out to, what messages were delivered, what were not delivered, who replied, who did not reply, you can then export those results as a CSV file in case you need to follow up with them outside of Cadence. So, for the people who didn't reply, maybe I need to now, give a phone call to all these people. I have all of this information readily available so that I can follow up outside of the system. And then again, the archive is all of the conversations, again, that I have moved over into there. Now, keyword auto reply is another automation piece. This needs to be turned on and enabled by someone on your team who is an administrator. So that would be, of course, Sarah can assist with that, as well as Shara. So please reach out if that is something that you're interested in having enabled. But this works as a single confirmation message. So if you want students to text in a particular keyword or phrase so that they get an automated message from you, you can program that to happen as such. So, say I have a situation where I need to reach out to people who still haven't completed an important application. I can have a situation set up where I send out a message to a group of people that says, text apply 2021 if you're interested in getting more information on your incomplete application. Then any student who texts back apply 2021 will get whatever confirmation message I put in here. The cool thing about these keyword auto replies is that you can program multiple keywords and multiple phrases. So say the students aren't really responding to directions and they're just texting back apply, or they're texting back application. You can then program multiple keywords to come in here so that you can make sure that people are getting this confirmation message, even if they're not necessarily following those directions to a T. Any questions about the personal inbox or managing your inbox? Okay, we're going to move along to now talking about the shared inboxes. So shared inboxes here do not belong to only you. They belong to all of the people associated with your site and your team, and multiple of members of your team, multiple users will have access to the communication that's coming out of here. This is, of course, very different from messages or my messages, because these conversations belong to just you. You're the only person who is in charge of managing those text conversations and managing the questions and concerns that might come through. Shared inboxes are, again, are designed for an entire office to be able to message out of. So if there are questions or concerns that multiple people can answer, or messaging that needs to go to perhaps all students or multiple sets of students, where the communication shouldn't be managed by just one person in their own account, that is where you would want to have a shared inbox set up. I have two set up for this team. One is titled Orientation Leaders, and the other is entitled Family Events. So you'll want to, of course, pay attention to which shared inbox, if you have multiple ones set up on your team, what communication needs to come out of what inbox, because it's usually associated with the audience and the type of messaging that's going out of there. So I'm just going to at random pick my orientation leader shared. As you can see, the inbox is set up and associated just so. I'm going to move that back into the inbox so you can see what a conversation would look like. So still has the same bulk action capabilities. You still would manage by archiving or opting people out if they didn't want to receive communication anymore. But the cool thing here is that when you're in the shared inbox and you decide, hey, I'm going to be the one who's going to respond to Mike here, you grab the conversation, click reply, and as you can see here, the conversation locks. This is because, again, more than one user has access to this account in this inbox. So you don't want to have two users or three users grabbing the same conversation and perhaps, sending a student, three text messages all with the same information or answering the same question. So this gives you some visibility as to who is managing conversations with your students here, and allows you to see, again, who is maintaining the order as far as addressing information that is coming through. When the conversation is done, you simply click back into it, and then you can, of course, move it into the archive. But if Michael were to text back in with an additional question or concern, his response will feed as a brand new message, and then it's really up to however you want to manage if the conversation is going to stay with you or if it's going to go to one other person on the team. Maybe it will be at your discretion on how that happens. The messages that are tied to the shared inbox don't come from one number. They come from a total of 6 numbers. And these 6 numbers don't belong to anybody. They belong to everybody and the team. But the numbers will actually stick to the students so that you don't have to necessarily keep introducing yourself each time. You just simply treat the conversation as you would. If you wish to self-identify, you can, but that's not necessary at this point, because the phone number that Michael will see will likely be the same phone number as he moves forward with his communication. Any questions or concerns about shared inboxes, managing or sending messages from this type of account? Okay. You'll, of course, want to double check with your team admins as to where communication really does need to be living. So if you're going to be tasked, again, with reaching out to students, you will want to specify, is this coming from my account, or is this something that needs to come from the office account? Because we want multiple users, multiple team members to have access to the conversations and to help with the text management. So scheduled messaging allows you to do just that, schedule a message to go out at a later date and time. You can schedule messages to come from your account, as well as any shared inboxes that you might have access to. And you can schedule messages all the way up to 12 months in advance. We don't necessarily recommend that, but it is a nice feature to have in the future. We do advise that messages that are perhaps going out to all students or to a very large group of students, those be scheduled in advance so that teammates can be aware of the fact that messaging, important messaging is going out that day, perhaps to everyone, and to maybe refrain from sending messages from a personal account so that students don't get double responses, or to let them know, hey, we're actually sending a message out from perhaps one of the shared accounts. So if you have access to that and that's a responsibility of yours, make sure you're logged into Cadence to help manage the questions and concerns that are coming through. You can also see on this calendar feature here, messages that were scheduled to go out at a later time, as you can see. Oops, there we go, right here. So those were messages that were successfully deployed. It can go to one person, or again, it can go to more than one person. Any questions on how to schedule a message in Cadence? All right, so now we're going to go down to contacts. So these are all of your potential text recipients. So these would be the students that work with you at the Gear Up site that you're responsible for, but it's every single student that is associated with that site. They have to be uploaded into the Cadence system. Doing so creates a contact record for them. This is not something that users are able to do. This is managed by someone with a little bit more advanced permission in the system. So this is not going to be a requirement of yours. So always make sure that if you are not seeing a contact record in the system, that you are reaching out to Sarah, who I believe is going to be managing a lot of the data. So that she can double check to make sure that that student, you have the necessary information on that student to create a record for them. Clicking into an individual contact record here is going to show me all of the information associated with this particular student, particularly their most important information, which will be their name, their mobile number, and their system ID. So we refer to that as a contact ID. That most commonly is like a student ID or a site ID. It's whatever is going to be only assigned to that particular student. No other person is going to have that type of configuration. So if your student's mobile information or ID needs to change, it's very important, again, that you reach out to someone with more advanced permissions in the system so that they can make sure that that information gets updated accordingly. If you happen to notice that other student data points needs to be uploaded, so any of the information that you will find down here underneath the title custom fields, if this information isn't correct, again, make sure that you escalate that to your project leader so that they can take the necessary steps to update it. You'll see all of the conversation history that I've had with Erin since she, first became eligible to receive Cadence communication. So going all the way back to February of this year. And I'm able, again, to track all of the conversations that we've had, both from personal accounts as well as shared inboxes. I'm also able to see what communication we had that was actually part of a formal campaign that's designated here in blue, as you can see. If you ever need to reference, again, a past conversation or information that was perhaps shared via text message, make sure, again, you go to the contact record and look at the message activity, because it will store it for this student for up to 2 years. You can also export this conversation history if it needs to be shared with other people, but you have access to this in the system. From Erin's contact profile, I can also send a Cadence text message. I can also opt her out or block her from receiving Cadence communication. So again, in past conversation, if Erin has told me thanks but no thanks, please remove me from your list, I can go in here and just toggle that button on, and that's what that looks like. Okay, any questions on contacts or the contact profile? Okay, so now we're going to move down into segments. So once you get students in the team to send messages to, you can send them individual Cadence text messages, one by one, or you also can send information en masse to more than one student at a time. So if you think about perhaps you have 50 students that you're working with, who are late submitting an application, and you need to notify them that it is, due tomorrow and that you still need to get that information. It would take a really long time to individually have to send the same text message to all, say, 50 of those people back to back, or you can simply just pull them all into one list and send the message off one time. We refer to that list here as a segment. So segments are contacts or students of like characteristics that need to get a particular message. There's a couple different ways in which you can build that list. You can either build that list through their system ID, so their contact ID, or you can build that list through their mobile number. All this means is that you're copying and pasting in this information so that the system can just pull these people together and pull them into one list. You'll have to give that list a name. So I highly identify that you give this something that's easily recognizable. You don't want to have a very confusing segment name that doesn't really give you a lot of context into who belongs in this group, what students make up this particular group of people who need to get this message. So if you wish to date it, or again, give it a very specific naming convention so that it's easily recognizable on site, I highly identify that you do that. It's also very important to make sure that after you create the segment, you go back into it and click to make sure it looks correct. So if you're building these lists out and you know that there's supposed to be 50 people in this segment, but there's only 6, that's going to be obviously a red flag that you'll want to reach out to your project leader so that they can dive a little bit deeper into why that error is happening. You can see here that every segment you made will be designated into contacts who are opted into receiving your text messages and contacts who've opted out. So Cadence does safeguard those people who are opted out from receiving your messages. So even though I tried to pull this particular contact in, Cadence will say, yes, they did meet, the list of criteria to be in this segment, but they're actually not going to get the message because they've already opted out. So they will not be sent that particular message. You can also build a segment by filtering the system with certain criteria. If you don't know who exactly needs to get the message, but you know the type of student that needs to get the message. So for example, say I want to send a message to all of my students here who are going to be commuters. I don't really know who that is off the top of my head. And it looks like I don't have, oh, maybe because I just put commuter. Sorry about that. See, it's very particular. It's very case sensitive. There we go. So I have a total of 4 people actually in my team here who are considered commuter students, but it's actually only going to send the message to these 3 because one has previously opted out. So I would just simply click next. Again, give it a very specific name. So 628 Mina's commuter message. And then I can identify down here if I want this particular segment to auto update. So what does that mean exactly? As new people are added into the team by my administrators who are commuter students, or if existing students in the team change their information and become commuter students, having this check to auto update means that they will automatically be pulled into this segment. So if this is going to be something that I'm reusing, over a period of time, I would probably want to have that auto update. If this is just a segment that I'm creating that's a one and done, I can always uncheck that box here and then click to save it. And then of course, go back in to double check to make sure that everything looks correct. And it does. Any questions on how to make segments or when to use segments? One important thing to note is that just because you're sending messages to more than one person at a time, they are not going to know that. It does not work like a group text message. This purely helps for your purposes to be able to manage the sending capabilities. So it just basically helps you streamline your communication better so that you don't have to individually message everyone. They don't receive it as a group message. You don't receive their responses amidst everybody else's messages. You're still able to manage all of the conversation individually. It just helps you with that initial sending. So campaigns are a great way for you to track how your messages are performing in the system. So if you do know that there's a message that's going out that you want to track and have Cadence run a report on, you'll want to create it as a brand new campaign and of course, label it as just so. You then will tag the campaign as a part of the message when you initially send it out, and Cadence will run a report on it for a 24-hour period. Once that 24-hour period is up, you'll be able to pull a report in and see all of the messaging associated with this outreach so that you can dive a little bit deeper into the analytics. If a message happens to come through outside of that 24-hour period and you want to tag it as a part of the campaign, you most certainly can. So say Mike's response here was a part of that campaign, but it came in after that 24-hour window, so it wasn't automatically tagged. I just go back in and tag it as a part of the new campaign. Any questions or concerns there? And then last here, reports, again, will just be that report or the campaign report that you can run. But the last feature here that we have are called Smart Message Automation. So this feature is only available for communication out of shared inboxes. You cannot send a smart message from your personal inbox. So this would be for a situation where you want to perhaps poll your students by posing to them a yes or no type of question. You can reach out to them with a particular message that falls into that yes or no type of category. And then depending on how they reply, they will receive this message here that you pre-program automatically. So you don't have to go back in and send this off. As soon as the student replies yes, they'll receive this message automatically. If they reply no, they'll receive this message automatically. The smart messages will deploy for a 24-hour period, very similarly to a campaign. After that 24-hour period is up, if a student does reply back into you, they will not receive this message automatically. It will be something that you have to physically send off to them by hand. If a student continues the conversation after they reply yes or no and get this automated message, all of those conversations will feed into the inbox for you so that you, again, can manage their additional questions and concerns. If they do not reply back with yes or no, and they reply something completely different, they will not receive this auto reply, any of these auto replies. you'll be able to flag that as a brand new message and then respond accordingly. Nothing is worse than if you know, send a message and then, you know, get a response back that doesn't pertain to any question or concern that you might ask and just kind of makes the conversation, you know, seem a little silly. So we thought very, very particularly about that. So they will only get auto replies for very specific behaviors that they engage in the system. If they do not reply to you at all, they will not receive an auto reply. So you, again, you can reach out to them at a later time and perhaps follow up either outside of Cadence or sending them an additional text message if you're looking for them to engage with you. Any questions on how to use smart messages? Okay. So one thing I did want to draw your attention to are the in-platform training modules that I highly suggest all users go through. When you first log into the system, they will automatically launch for you, but you're able to launch and relaunch them by clicking on this Show Quick Tips area here too. So as you can see, it's a combination of videos as well as text-based prompts that will walk you through the system. And you can launch and relaunch them as many times as you need because they do not go away. So say, you know, you're still a little fuzzy on campaigns, you can launch them, quit them, launch them again, and again, watch whatever videos you would like and perform the text-based prompts and the guided path as much or as little as you need to. Any questions on how to access those modules? All right, would we like to see some Cadence messaging in action?
Yes, please.
All right, so as I mentioned before, we're going to skip over that big red compose button at the top. So this is, of course, where you're going to go when you want to send a message. So Cadence is automatically going to ask me, where is this message needing to come from? Because I have access to these multiple inboxes. So I get to decide, okay, is this just going to be messaging that I'm in charge of? Or again, is this going out from one of those shared accounts that, you know, more than one team member will need to have access to? So I'm just going to pick my own personal Cadence line. I can either send this again to an individual person by typing in their name, maybe if I know their mobile number by heart or their ID. That's usually the easiest way to do that. Or again, one of those segments that I've already created. So let's do the commuters that I just created. So I can either type freehand using a first name merge field to pull the stuff in. Oops, I promise I can type. Add an emoji, or you can add in a GIF, a picture, you know, any sort of multimedia messaging that's under 5 megabytes. There's also templates that your project leaders can create for you. So that's another question you're going to want to ask is the messaging something that I'm in charge of, or do you want me to use an existing template that has been created for me? If I wanted to track this as a campaign, I can do that. And if I only wanted to send this to my assigned contacts, that's something you'll need to double check with your project leader. So if individual students are going to be assigned to you in the system, you may want to check this box here. So in case the segment that you created, perhaps it maybe contained other people that don't necessarily belong to you, you're not sure, you can check this just to kind of safeguard and make sure that, okay, it's only going to my students who are in this particular segment. You then click next. Oops, I spelled that wrong. And it will give you, of course, a preview. It'll tell you the number of people that it's going to, how long it's going to take. So really pay attention to the delivery duration time to make sure it's going to be appropriate. So as it says here, about 500 messages from a single Cadence number will take about 90 minutes to send. So you just want to make sure that, again, you're giving the system enough time to send the message out. Cadence does have quiet hours. So if you attempt to send a message that's going to eclipse 10 p.m. in your local time zone, Cadence will have those messages fail so that students aren't getting texts at 3 o'clock in the morning and getting very angry. You can either send it now or, again, schedule it to go out at a later date and time. I'm going to send it now. And if I click on this paper airplane icon, you can see that the status is pending and the message is indeed going out. Once it's done, it will let me know that it's all done, and then I can see the messages have gone through from in the sent message details portion of my inbox. Any questions or concerns on how that works? And there it is. Okay. All right, so I know we're coming up on 1 o'clock, but there's just a few texting etiquette best practices that I did want to share with you. I will, of course, pass along this, this particular slide deck that I'm about to share. So feel free, of course, to look at that information at a later date and time. So as I mentioned before, I am a former Cadence end user. So please feel free to reach out to me at any point in time should you want to talk about your text messages in more detail. If you feel like maybe you're not at the reply rate that you really want to have, or if you feel like, you know, perhaps some of your wording can use just a little bit more work. Again, I'm here to always help and collaborate with you. And of course, share ideas based upon your use cases. So these are sort of the top 5 tips that I like to share with brand new users and reinforce for existing users in the team that you really want to follow these rules when you're engaging in Cadence text messaging. Always make sure that you're properly identifying yourself, because the likelihood that your students are going to save you in their phone with your name is unfortunately going to be very slim. I worked with students, you know, for, you know, sometimes more than an entire school year. And I always identified myself as Lena from Mongoose moving forward, because I could not guarantee that they were going to recognize my number or that they had saved my number. So it kind of saves you from that dreaded, who is this and why are you texting me, text message back, or even worse, perhaps students quickly misidentifying you as spam and just choosing to opt out of all of your communication. It's very important to make sure that you're personalizing your messages so that you don't sound spammy. Mobile carrier networks like AT&T, Verizon, they have very strict spam filtering mechanisms in place. They don't like language or content that sounds or appears to be spam-like, even when it's genuinely not. And they reserve the right to block that communication. So the more that you can sound like a real life person, because again, you are a real life person texting your students, the better off you are. The easiest way to do that is just to avoid a lot of gimmicks like all caps, urgency language, like urgent message from Mongoose University, something like that. That's really going to raise a lot of red flags. And also, students don't really like to see that. They like to see stuff with their first name in it. They like to see, hi, this is Lena from Mongoose University, your counselor. They like all of that context because, again, it grabs their attention and tells them, hey, I need to pay attention to this because my counselor is giving me important information, or is sharing that I need to do something for them. So just make sure that you're taking the necessary steps to do that in all of your outreach. If you want to have a really good reply rate and you want to see a lot of engagement in Cadence, using questions and prompts to move the conversation forward is going to be key. Students don't know that they need to respond to you unless you pretty much tell them that they need to respond. They won't know how to respond, and they won't respond if you're not crystal clear So be as, clear and as concise and to the point with them, and just make sure that you're giving themselves enough opportunity to engage with you in the system. Brand awareness, of course, is going to be key when you're using Cadence, because you are, representing your school, you're representing the site, you're representing, the greater Gear Up organization. So you want to make sure that your messaging, of course, is on brand. It doesn't need to be as formal as it would be an email, but it needs to be much more formal, obviously, than any text messaging that you're sending to friends or family members. So if you ever have questions or concerns about whether or not your messaging is on brand, make sure you reach out to your project leaders for this, because I'm sure that they can give you suggestions, or if needed, program a template for you so that the wording reflects specifically what needs to be said. And then be ready to respond. The worst thing that you can do is reach out to students and not be in a position to address their questions and concerns. Don't send messages on a Friday afternoon if you're going to be out of the office at 4:59 p.m. You don't want to have your students have to wait unnecessarily long for messaging. So try to obviously send messages a little bit earlier in the day. Really use the average reply time information from your dashboard to see how quickly your students are engaging with you and reaching back out to you, and just making sure that you have reasonable expectations on your availability. We know that texting is only going to be a portion of what you do on a daily basis. So you shouldn't necessarily be tied to texting 24/7. But again, if you send a message out, you need to be in a position to respond to it in a timely manner. Some texting do's, again, be clear, be concise, be relevant. The fastest way you'll get opt-outs is if you're overwhelming the student in Cadence and blasting them consecutive messages on consecutive days. That's of course when we see opt-out rates go up. So just make sure that you're being very intentional with your messaging, and that you're planning your Cadence communication well in advance, so that you're not kind of overwhelming yourself or overwhelming the students. And don't forget to have fun. You have emojis and GIF capabilities, so definitely liven it up a little bit if you're looking to capture their attention. And then in terms of some texting etiquette don'ts, again, as I mentioned, mobile carriers reserve the right to block content that they do feel is suspicious in nature. The use of hyperlinks, email addresses, and hashtags tend to fall on that naughty list. So we advise that you use those with you do so basically at your own risk. So you want to, of course, use your discretion when you are texting out that information. We advise that you never blast that type of information to students. If anything, you should establish a conversation history with the student before perhaps sharing that information or that content via text message, and make sure it's only in situations, again, where people ask for it. So don't, randomly blast out a hyperlink to 1,000 people. Only do it, again, to smaller population sizes and people who ask for it. It does not 100% resolve the risk, but it helps from a law of numbers standpoint to keep your numbers lower from information that's being picked up by those carriers. Make sure that you are following whatever greater communication policies your office has in place, and following codes of conduct. In the same vein as that, if students choose to, violate the codes of conduct, so perhaps they text with you in an inappropriate or abusive manner, you do reserve the right to opt out or block them. Make sure, of course, that you're bringing all of those types of situations to your supervisors. And then never, of course, text sensitive information or solicit sensitive information in Cadence for any reason. Avoid trying to name any segments or campaigns with sensitive student information. Cadence does have mechanisms in place to block certain information. Like if a student tries to text you their social security number, Cadence will block it. That's just one example, but it's very important to just make sure that you are not violating any, you know, student privacy rules and regulations. And then don't use text messaging for everything. We know that it's extremely convenient, and we know that it's how, again, students like to be contacted, but it's very important to use this medium in a responsible way. So again, students don't feel like they're being blasted and overwhelmed, because we know that that's where students are going to either opt out, or they're simply going to stop paying attention to you. So it's very important, again, to make sure that you are finding the right balance between texting and your other modes of communication. So this, of course, an example of what a perfect text message would look like, because again, it checks all of these boxes here. It's very clear and concise. We know who it's going to and where it's coming from, and we know what it's about. So this, of course, opens up the door to a really good text conversation, and more importantly, for Marie to get the information that she needs from John on how he wishes to proceed with his spring registration. And then last here, just to give you an example, we would never advise sending a text message like this. Bit.ly links, under no circumstances should link shorteners ever be texted out. They're huge red flags for carriers. Oops, sorry about that. And again, this message is just very, unfortunately, very spam-like in nature. So it's not going to get a ton of responses or activity, and it may indeed get you flagged by the carriers. Any questions or concerns about the texting etiquette piece?
I don't have any, but I really thank you for taking time and skipping your lunch to come and train us on all of this stuff.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. So I will, of course, be following up with everyone via email with this recording, as well as a copy of that slide deck. I'm also going to share a couple other resources that I think are going to be really helpful to everyone. One of them is our Cadence New User Guide. It's a series of videos as well as knowledge-based articles that are organized by feature. So if you're just kind of looking for like quick hit information, that's a great resource to go to, as well as our Cadence Campus. So this is our living virtual library of all the content that we create about texting, as well as Harmony, which is our chatbot. So webinars, texting guides, case studies, you name it, it's there. So please feel free, when you have the time, to browse and, read up on some of that. We have some great webinar series that have been hosted, so check that information out. We're not in a position just yet to launch. So please do not start using the system until you're given explicit instruction to do so, by your administrators. But I will continue to circle back with everyone, double check to make sure everyone was able to get into Cadence, double check on, their access and whatnot. So if you have questions or concerns, you know exactly where to find me. So don't hesitate to reach out.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think we are all good to go. And then I'll get this out to the staff members who weren't able to attend.
Yep, I'll make sure that I forward it on over to everybody. And then if the admins just want to hang on the call real quick, there's just a couple things we'll just want to debrief on real quickly. But everybody else is more than free to drop off. Look for my emails to come through later today. Again, I really appreciate your time this morning/afternoon.